everyone. Welcome to the Epic Vision Zone. I'm Jane Applegath, founder of the Epic Vision Zone, where we say your life becomes epic. Every show, we offer you an inspiring person or message to bring you closer to your epic life now. Thank you for being here. You can listen to the audio version on your favorite app or watch it on YouTube, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Billionaire Howard Schultz wrote, "The most powerful and endearing brands are built from the heart." Tiffany Neuman is a visionary branding strategist who helps mission-driven entrepreneurs and influencers up-level their businesses. After 15 years in the corporate world working with brands such as FedEx, Stoli Vodka, and Burt's Bees, Tiffany established her own revolutionary branding business titled Your Legacy Brand. The goal: to elevate your influence, impact, and income to legacy status. Using a unique hands-on approach that views branding as a self-development process, Tiffany collaborates with clients across the globe to help them 10x their sales and shine even brighter as thought leaders. Her hands-on method redefines branding, saying it's not a logo, it's not a brand board, it's not a set of rules to follow. Your brand is your legacy. A former professor of design and branding, a contributor to Entrepreneur, and a featured branding expert in Forbes multiple times, Tiffany is also host to the Legacy Brand podcast. When she's not helping clients create their legacy brands, she's spending quality time with her husband and 2 daughters. Welcome, Tiffany. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jane. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Yes, I am as well. I have to say that I have been working with Tiffany, and I have been so enthused with the results I have been getting. And she is like a dream weaver. That's what I like to call her, because she makes you work, but you get results. I love it. So let's get started. I am really curious, Tiffany, what inspired you to do the work that you do today?
Thank you for that question. So there's a lot of things that come together, but really the main reason is I found myself working with these Fortune 500 brands in corporate, and that was at one point my dream. And however, I felt like it became a little bit soul sucking after a while. To be transparent, we had some big pharma clients that came on and some other things that I just wasn't aligned with anymore. And so I had my daughter. And so between those two things together, I knew I had to change course. And so I thought about, what industries could I impact, and found myself meeting a lot of other entrepreneurs and online business owners and realizing they were my people. And so many of them didn't really understand branding in the way that we as brand experts view branding. And so I knew I could bring a lot of strategy and mission-driven approaches to that specific subset of people. And that's how it all started.
Yes, and we're so fortunate that it started for you so that you could spread all of the fabulous tools and expertise that you have, because as you said, you didn't have to influence the masses. You could influence the few who then go out and influence the more. And so I loved that story that you shared with us. And I'm so grateful, like I said, that you've ventured into this. Now that we're here in the 21st century, branding feels like it has changed. So how has it changed over the years that you've seen, and what are consumers looking for in a brand today?
Oh, that is such a deep question, Jane. I love your questions. So, you know, first of all, what hasn't changed, if you're okay if I'd say that first, is that I truly believe that we're almost going full circle. So when businesses have been around forever, but when we really started marketing and branding was necessarily when products were commoditized and things like that, it was we could just share the benefits and those, like the very simple things about a product, and they would sell because marketing and branding was new. And before that, everything was always built on relationships. So the one thing that I feel like hasn't changed was relationships. And I actually think we're coming a little bit full circle in that, especially in the online space, because I feel like we went through a phase, I guess, before 2020 and everything that happened then, where that the relationships kind of started taking a back seat. And a lot of people were not really focused on relationships and buying products from people online they didn't know. And now I feel like that's coming full circle and people want to work with humans again. And what's changed is the advent of AI is huge, and it's really been taking over our lives in good ways and in not so great ways. And so it's important to understand how to utilize AI. I think it's really an amazing technology that if we don't learn how to use it, we will be kind of left behind. But also, it's really important not to rely on it, because our relationships, storytelling, and the heart and soul of the brand is going to be missing if you rely on AI too much. So it's kind of that like humanness versus not human, and it's brought around so many changes. And there's other technologies as well, but I feel like AI is really the big one, of course, right now.
Right, right. It's certainly at the forefront. It's what I felt too is the conscious consumer, which people have
Mm-hmm.
become a lot more, what I would say, enlightened, for lack of a better word, or
Yeah,
conscious about their purchases, right? Whether it be a service or whether it be a product. And, people now read the label or they'll read the story behind the brand. And of course, that's where your genius comes into play. And that's where, like you said, the humanness comes into the branding, because it's the authenticity that AI cannot duplicate. It can hone
absolutely.
the words and the story, but it cannot be the authentic you that people are looking to, like you say, build a relationship with. So, yeah, I totally agree with you completely. So, that being the case, then what is a legacy brand and why do entrepreneurs need one?
Yeah, so a legacy brand is something that I developed. So when I came again from the corporate space into the entrepreneurial space, and I realized what a lot of people were doing were branding for where they are at right now. And along with the consciousness that you were just talking about, people have also gotten a lot more aware, and they know when they're being sold to. And as business owners, we are selling a service or a product, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that awareness is also there more. And so, with a legacy brand, what I tended to see people doing was branding for the present moment, which is okay. However, when you brand for where you're at now, a lot of people find themselves like constantly rebranding. I like to say that people build the plane while they fly it, and they end up building brands unconsciously because as entrepreneurs, we're busy people. So we grab a logo here, we grab some colors, then we work with a copywriter on this launch, and then we work with a different copywriter on a different launch, and we DIY, and we do all these things, and then it just turns into this kind of like disconnected Frankenstein brand, I like to call it. So the whole point of a legacy brand is really looking 3, 5, 10 years into the future. Where is your vision taking you? Where do you really see your business going? And then we reverse engineer it. So then you show up and you're creating the brand from the vision. So not only does it position you where you want to go faster, but it also usually helps people get to that place. Of course, they have to take the actions that go along with it. It's not full magic, but there is a magic to it because it helps you get there faster. And then the other piece with legacy, of course, isn't necessarily like, oh, I want my name on a building or I want a statue in my name, but it's really that legacy that you're leaving behind, the ripple effect that you're creating. So the people that I work with, of course, they want to make a massive income and support their families and give back, but most of all, they want to make an impact. And that's a short story I shared when I started as an entrepreneur on my own. I was like, well, what's a brand strategist? How am I going to change the world? Because I really had it in my heart to. And I finally realized, oh, if I help all these amazing entrepreneurs, then they're helping other people, and that creates a ripple effect. So to me, that's really the legacy piece. And then the last thing I will say is typically when people come to work with me, it's when they're doing the work in the world that will be their legacy. So a lot of people dabble in different businesses just to kind of test the waters. Not always. Some people come right in and they're like, this is my life's work. I did. But it really is the work that you're meant to do to make an impact in the world.
Mm, I love that. You went from the Frankenstein brand full circle to the legacy. And what a picture you painted with that. That is brilliant. Just that juxtaposition, because when you said the Frankenstein brand, right away I got it. I was like, that's a great visual, because you're right. That's what a lot of us do. And it's because, like you said, we haven't built that foundation. We haven't
Right.
looked at that long term, because we want to get up and running and making money and building our client base. And so we just go, 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 go. And of course, that's when, it's important to pull back and say, okay, I need to now look at this from a foundational point. Where am I going in the long term? But I love that. That was really well said. Thank you, Tiffany. So how then do you help entrepreneurs create a legacy with their brand? You might have touched on
Sure.
that a little bit.
Yeah, so I would say that's the first place is we always start from the vision and kind of reverse engineer and work backwards. So I work in a deep dive way with my clients, whether that's one-on-one or a group setting. I truly believe that your brand is the biggest investment you can make as a business owner, because if you think about it, you want your business to be scalable, you want it to be sustainable, and you want it to be sellable. And so those three things are really what we focus on while we're building the brand is how do we create that foundation so it's easier to scale, and so it's not going to burn us out. So we're not constantly trying to grab at all these things. We have a process to follow, which is what I call a brand operating system. And then ultimately, a lot of people don't necessarily think about like an exit strategy in their online businesses, but it's something that I've been thinking about more and more. Like my daughter's only 10 and we've talked jokingly like, oh, maybe she'll take over the business, but who doesn't want an asset that they can sell? And so that's really part of that too, is like thinking around the vision, the big picture, and creating an asset that's sellable. And when you have a really structured, solid brand in place, there's so much more than most people think of the brand as like, oh, it's my logos and colors and fonts. And you've probably remember this, Jane. I have this, it's like a very common analogy that's used for a lot of different things, but it's so good, which is the iceberg, right? And so the visuals of a brand is what we see above the surface. Below the surface is just a ton of content that most people skip over: vision, values, voice, like the list goes on. There's about 30 different things that we cover in the brand foundations to then get to the correct visuals for a brand. And that's what I think that people don't necessarily realize, is that if your brand is off, your marketing won't convert as well, right? And so we really look at holistically the entire business, offers, naming conventions, everything, to create that brand ecosystem that then creates the legacy brand. So all the thought leaders that maybe you look up to, we look up to as a collective, Marie Forleo, Brene Brown, Brendon Bouchard, whoever that is for you, whether you like those specific people or not, they've done the deep work to really look at what's underneath the surface and create a brand that's scalable, sustainable, and sellable.
Mm, that's pure gold there. I mean, seriously, as entrepreneurs, many of us do not think that far in advance. And those questions and that opportunity that is possibly
Mhm.
available to us, we get so focused in the moment, because we, like you said, I said, we want to get this up and running and the financing, et cetera, et cetera. But I have to
Exactly.
say, from personal experience, it is a deep, deep dive. I'm telling you, Tiffany really put you to work. I was like, my mind. I mean, but coming out the other end, it is like, it's like the whole world opens up because you then have a direction, you have a path, you start going deep and finding answers that you didn't even know were there, and it really, really helps you pave that roadway and that map to where you want to go. So yes, absolutely. Well, we touched a little bit on conscious messaging. So you help clients ditch bro marketing tactics and instead use conscious messaging. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so actually, I love this question too because we didn't touch on that as much. I think that's another thing that's really shifting in the industry. So, the past, I don't want to label it, but maybe 10 or so years, maybe even more, there was a specific structure that online entrepreneurs were often taught in how to grow their businesses, how to scale, how to sell. And again, as the awareness in consumers have grown, and the sophistication, I guess you could say, that paired with, like you said, people want to work with people they know, like, and trust. A lot of people have invested in things and haven't really had amazing results, perhaps. Um, and so at this point, and there's a lot of heart-centered people like you and I that also don't want to come off as salesy and just be creepy, to be honest. And I'm not calling anything out or anyone out specifically, but if you're listening to this and you've been in the space for long enough, you know what we're talking about. So basically, my view is that, you know, I don't want to get too deep into it, but I truly believe like there's a spiritual change in the planet happening too. And I don't even know how to label it specifically. But I think there is an elevation happening with consciousness. And along with that, people also want to show up. And why should we have to convince people? Or, you know, there's a lot of people talking about persuasion marketing. Like, I don't want to persuade people. I want to really showcase, my genius and help my clients showcase their genius in a way that's very genuine, unauthentic, and shows their essence and their expertise. And if there's people out there who need that work, they're going to come. There really is no need to persuade or convince. And honestly, this day and age, that's turning off people more than it is inviting them in. And I think that's another big shift that we're seeing right now. And I think those people who continue in that model will still probably continue to get work, but it tends to also attract clients that aren't as easy to work with. So when you talk in that scarcity mindset a lot, it attracts people who are stuck in scarcity.
Yeah.
But when you're speaking more evolved language and consciousness and creating invitations from a place of love and true like authenticity, you're attracting people that are elevated and much easier to work with. So there's so many benefits.
Yes. Oh my gosh. You hit on one of my favorite quotes from Rumi, which is who you seek is seeking you. And
Mm,
that's where the connection comes in because your heart, your energy, your spirit, whatever you want to call it, is going to resonate with those that are seeking you. And like you
mhm,
said, there'll still be what I call the hit and run, you know, type of marketing, but it's exactly that. It's hit, get the money, and run. Because, like you said, those clients usually don't stick around. They just want a quick fix, or maybe they become very disgruntled, or they don't get what they want because neither of you are speaking a heart language. And so,
mm.
yeah, it's really yeah, that makes a huge difference on a conscious level. And you're right. I feel like you do that there is a big shift. People are looking for more authenticity. There's no question about it. Well, how would
Mhm.
you describe then a company's brand identity and its impact on building their business?
Ooh, you have so many great questions, Jane. So the brand identity to me means a lot of things. So when I was a professor and I was teaching branding, a brand identity would literally be like the visuals. How are you showing up? It's the identity of the brand, the vision that we were talking about. What are your values? What is your voice? How are you speaking your language? And I love that Rumi quote, Jane, like you hit it. Like I got chills when you said that because I was like, yes, that is it. So for me, it's also the energetics, right? And that does, sometimes it's a little out there for some people, but it's the truth. How are you showing up? How are you making people feel? There is an energy and an essence to your brand. And that's really what I do, is help pull that out of people. So that's really the identity of how you're showing up in the world. So there's different facets of it. There's really that front facing facade, which is important. You know, I teach my daughter not to judge the book by the cover. And unfortunately, we do as humans, especially online with our short attention spans. It's literally down to zero point 0.5 seconds where we make a judgment call, especially in the younger generations. I don't even know how they
Mm.
scroll so quickly. I'm like, are you even seeing what you're looking at? And so that is the brand identity, the visuals. But again, there's so many unique layers below that. And again, it goes back to what I call a brand operating system. It's the identity in so many different facets of who you are, how you're showing up, and who you're being. And when you capture that in a really genuine way, just everything we talked about locks into place, which is really amazing.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And you're right about the younger generation. I don't really think they're looking at it, Tiffany. I think they're just doing it for something to do. Because I watch them and I'm like, there's no way your brain is absorbing whatever it is you're staring at. It's just like a habit. You know, it's like smoking. You have to put something in your mouth. Well, this is the habit, right? And it's just
It's so true. I could
preoccupying.
have a whole nother hour long discussion on that, but we'll save
I
that for
know
another
that's
time.
another podcast. Yeah, maybe we need to have some sparkle come out of the phone for to grab their attention. I don't know. It's getting, that generation. Yeah, well, we don't need to deal with them right now because I'm not sure that they're not our demographic anyway. But needless to say, it is something that you're right. We need to grab their attention. But once it's that relationship building. It all comes down to that relationship. And I'm going back to who you seek is seeking you. It's I know it's for those who aren't in, it's kind of the quantum leap, but it's the vibration. I always say, think of it as we're
Mhm.
broadcasting towers. And whatever you're feeling, that is your emotions, your energy in motion, is a frequency that you are actually admitting into the quantum field or the universe, whatever you want to call it, or God. And that frequency is connecting with someone or something. Might sound a little bit out there, but that's really what is happening. And if you go back to Einstein,
Absolutely.
he knew all about it. So yeah, it really makes a difference when you start to embody your brand identity as well, because you want to feel it, right? I always say to
Mhm.
people, if you don't like how your vision statement feels, like if you close your eyes and you have someone read it back to you, how does it make you feel? If there's an emptiness
Mhm.
there, you got to go back to the drawing board. If it make gives you chills, if it moves you, then you're on the right path. So tell us three keys to creating a legacy brand and briefly describe each.
Absolutely. So, in my legacy brand method, I have three core components, being communication, connection, and consistency. And the reason being is there's, like we talked about earlier, there's so many pieces of the brand ecosystem, the brand operating system. However, these three are really what I believe makes the difference, and that most people leave out of their brand or they're not consciously thinking about. So the communication piece is obviously like that conscious messaging that you talked about, how we're speaking, how our language is, whether we're showing up in person, whether we're showing up online in all the various formats. And the thing is, our communication creates demand, right? And demand is where our leads come from. So that's really why that piece is so important. Then we move to connection. So that's all about the relationships that we were talking about. And again, people don't think of their brand doing this, but if all of these pieces, these three core pieces aren't like really narrowed down and clear, then everything else that's built upon the brand, your marketing, your sales strategy, all of that usually falls flat because you don't have these in your foundation. So the connection is what leads to you being a category of one brand. So when I say category of one, there's so many people online doing the same things, that you're doing most likely. And so how do you stand out? And this is really the key to those on-demand sales happening, is when you are standing out and you show up as a category of one, you are differentiated from everybody out there due to the connection that you're creating in people's hearts, in people's minds, and then that really helps position you. And then, so the third key is consistency. And so the consistency is really a huge piece of the puzzle, like we talked about earlier with the Frankenstein brand. And if your messaging's not clear, this leads to you having a cohesive ecosystem. So when you have a cohesive ecosystem, that brand operating system is in place, it's running smoothly. And to us, it's counterintuitive. We often feel like we're repeating ourselves, or maybe we're being boring. But the truth is, because things are changing and moving online so much, like we talked about earlier, we need to almost be a broken record for people to see our message enough and start to recognize us and to really understand where we're coming from. And so there's statistics around there. It used to be like somebody needs to hear your message 7 times. I've heard it like up to 30 now before it really sets in their brain. So again, we try to change things up as entrepreneurs because we're getting bored, but our audience actually needs that consistency. So that's the third piece, is to create that cohesive ecosystem, to be consistent. And that really leads to thought leadership. So those people that we're recognizing, we're seeing often, if you notice, they're often repeating the same things in different ways over and over. And that's because they are focused on what they're speaking about, and then also what they're going to offer. And there's a method to the madness.
Yeah, no, that's an art. Like you said, they're saying the same thing but in a different way, which is for me that's a challenge. That's it sounds really interesting. But yes, I can see that the individual would find it kind of boring, but it's something that we need to hone, because you're absolutely right. Repetition is key. People need to hear what you're saying, and if you keep changing your identity, you keep changing your words, you keep changing what it is that you're speaking about, then people are going to say, well, what is it that they're selling, or what is the service that she's offering? Absolutely. Boy, that makes total sense. Well, you touched a little bit on this, but tell us why you believe developing your brand is a spiritual process. That's very interesting.
Yeah, so this came to me. I mean, again, I was in corporate working with these big brands, so I never used to necessarily think that, because it was just a cut and dry process. But it's very different when you're selling, like I worked with Adidas and we'd sell shoes. Okay, that's very cut and dry. And there is still like the feeling tone and the energetics that could be behind that. But what I realized in the entrepreneurial space is oftentimes we're showing up as thought leaders, and we are human beings. We have spirit running through us. We have, and this is not necessarily a religious thing. It's just, back to the energetics and the quantum and things. And so to really capture the core essence of someone, I always say you can't see the label from inside the bottle, right? Because it's hard to have an objective view about yourself as a human, as a being, as a spiritual entity. Like I've heard a lot of spiritual teachers say, you are a spirit living in a human body. And so for that energy and resonance to come across, you do have to dig deeper. It's not just this surface, like, let's put lipstick on a pig and just make it look pretty. This is the brand. It's truly getting down to the core essence. And I think we've become quite disconnected as humans from like who we actually even are, just because of all the technology and the shifts and the changes. And then also, this is true for everybody, but especially as women, we go through different phases in our lives. So like, I was a college student, and then I was in corporate, and then personally I had a daughter and I got married, and then and then one child has moved out of the house. And then, so we go through these like identity shifts and almost identity crises at some point. And then it's almost like, well, who am I anymore? And how do I show up in the world? And unconsciously, right? So we have our conscious and our unconscious mind. Consciously, we might be like, oh, I'm this, but unconsciously is a different thing. And we've often lost touch with like what's deep inside and who we truly are, because there's layers that get put on us by society, by who we think we need to be. Even if we're like, oh, I'm showing up as my authentic self, a lot of the time there's a lot of layers that could be peeled off that we're not aware of. And it's not anybody's fault. It's just what happens as we age and in the world.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And I have to say, the going through the process of creating your brand manual, which is what I have had the pleasure of partaking in with Tiffany, is digging into that deepness and digging into that who you are and why you do what you do. So, yes, that's why I said earlier that it is a lot of work, but it is getting into and going a lot deeper than you would ever expect. So, her process really, really helps you find that identity, because you're absolutely right, Tiffany. We change. I mean, that's just life. But
Mhm.
having our core centered in a foundation is key to expressing that to the people that will resonate with you, because there is a tribe. We all connect with certain people because of a reason, and that's because we've found our tribe, so to speak. Absolutely. But thank you for that. So, what are the
Mhm.
three biggest mistakes that you see people making in their brands?
So, the biggest three mistakes that I typically see people making, we've touched on a little bit, which is building their brand unconsciously, because again, it's not your fault, but because we have so many things as entrepreneurs that we're working on, like you said, building the business, getting clients, all of the things that oftentimes it'll be 5, 10 years down the road when people kind of wake up and come to me and say, oh my goodness, like I've made a mess here. I need to clean this up. And or pivoting and they're not realizing it. So the thing, if I could leave one takeaway today, is if you haven't consciously been building the brand in a deep way, this is maybe a wake up call to really start doing that and to start looking at the vision and where you want to take the brand, and really breathe new life into it. And this happens a lot of times too, where things will kind of plateau for people or get a little bit stagnant. And it's just because they've kind of been like going through the reps and doing the same things and not breathing that new life into their brand and business. And so that's really the biggest mistake that I see, is just the being unconscious around it. The second piece is really not showing up as their true self. So we touched on this too, and it's usually unconscious. I have so many stories that I could tell, but I'll tell one quick if that's okay, just because it helps to paint a picture. So I have one client, Ina, and she's this amazing woman from South America. She lives in the States now, and she's fiery, and she's a coach. And when she came, she's like, I don't know, my brand just doesn't feel right. I really don't know why. It's not converting well. I don't know what to do. Well, we took a look at her website and her messaging and everything else. And the website was literally pale blue, baby pink, Her pictures were very kind of subdued and I guess you could say quiet. It's hard to explain a visual picture, but when I compared how she was showing up with who I met in the Zoom room when we connected and she was on fire and all over the place, they were two completely different people. But again, she didn't see the label from inside the bottle because she was showing up as somebody else. Well, what we uncovered was that as a child, because she was a firecracker and so amazing, her family would often tell her, Ina, quiet down. You're too loud. You're too much. You need to do that. So unconsciously, she was showing up in a quiet version of herself because of what other people had put on her growing up. And this happens really often in a lot of different ways. Even with myself, it's something that I've worked on because I did not love being visible. I like to be behind the scenes presenting other people. And I had to force myself in a kind way to show up. And I've like, it's been a journey for myself, even as though I know how to do it. I've had to answer these questions for myself. Who am I? And show more bits and pieces of my identity that I didn't even realize I was necessarily hiding, right? So that's another piece that I think is really key and core. And then the third piece is, I actually think it would be not dreaming big enough. I've had so many clients who come in and we do the vision process and I say, where do you want to be 3, 5, 10 years? And they'll do a nice like, oh, I want to be here. And some people go for it, but they don't necessarily believe it. But usually by the time our process is over, most people have gone back and revisited their vision a few times, because as you get more comfortable and as you really settle in and you're like, oh, this is my essence. Oh, this is my ideal client. These are offers. This is amazing. You can go back and look at the vision and say, wow, I didn't let myself dream big enough. Like I didn't go and allow myself to believe that I was either worthy or I was capable or the quantum leap was possible. And so that's one thing that I love to offer to people is don't look at your current circumstances. Let yourself dream big because you were called to this work for a reason and it is your legacy and you're passionate about it for a reason. So even if that dream feels really big and scary, that's one of the branding pieces of the branding process as well, is like during it, you go through the process of like letting it settle in and getting comfortable and allowing it to unfold. So by the time you're done, you can really own that big dream. And I think that's what holds a lot of people back in business in general, not just in the brand, because we have these big visions, but the fear comes up, right? It's just a natural thing.
Right. No, I love that. And when you go through this process, what it does is it builds your confidence. And I think that's one of the reasons that they start to dream bigger. I've often heard the saying, if your dream doesn't scare you, it's not big enough. And I love that because
Yes.
absolutely, if it, like you said, I've had the issue of being really big. So I've got the other thing, and people are like, "Why you're crazy, Jane?" But it's like, no, I like to dream big. But I agree with you 100%. Most people keep it small, and yes, it is fear, and they don't want to dream that big because they're like, "No, I'll never get there." That's
Mhm.
the failure, the fear of failure. But absolutely, I agree 100%. Yes, thank you for those. Well, what is the number one thing you suggest people fix first in their brand?
Mm. So, this is an interesting one because there could be so many different things that could be out of alignment. I would say the very first thing, and this is a little counterintuitive, like somebody would say, well, if somebody's going to see your, Instagram handle or your LinkedIn bio, the first 5 seconds, you should fix that. Yes, that's all important, but I honestly think I'm going to just go back to the vision, honestly, because if you're not aligned and excited about where you're going, you can work and do all of these strategies and work on the brand ecosystem and create this elaborate thing. But if it's not actually you and it's not actually where you want to head, then what's the point? And it's not going to actually work well. So I would say that would be the first thing to fix. I don't know if it's actually fixing, but get the clarity on. And then strategically, in more of a traditional branding sense, I would say actually your messaging is the first thing to fix. A lot of people worry about their logo or their website. And my team and I do logos and websites. We do the whole brand ecosystem. However, the very first thing I would fix is your core messaging, because that's really what is drawing people in to work with you. And if that's not aligned and if it's not really speaking their language, then nothing else is going to work.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It won't matter how pretty your logo is or how great you look if the message doesn't connect. I mean, because words do have energy, and that is
Mm-hmm.
what people are hearing or reading. It's what they will resonate with. And of course, yes, I love that you say that your vision is number one, because I always say your vision is your compass. It's your compass to your behaviors, your thoughts, and your actions. And without that compass, you're just going in circles. Yeah, it's the road. Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited to delve into this one. What are some of the valuable results that clients have gained from investing in your program? And now I'm not speaking necessarily about the brand message. I am talking about the inner growth that they've had, possibly the spiritual growth or the shift in their attitude, because I've read some incredible results
Mm-hmm.
on your website, but I too, myself personally, have experienced them. So give us a little insight into some of the valuable results that make your program so unique, and you as well, Tiffany.
Well, thank you for that, Jane. And I would say, yeah, like I could talk a lot about how somebody's launches converted 10 times better, or how they immediately had new clients pouring in or attracting their ideal clients. But I think that is really the most valuable pieces is those identity shifts and the embodiment. So, I talked about my client, Ina. Another person is one of my clients, Elizabeth Hartkey. She was a Beachbody coach, amazing mom. And similarly, she was really showing up in the way that she thought she needed to as a Beachbody coach. Nothing against Beachbody, but it was just, she showed up kind of like glam and all these different things that we won't get into. But the amazing thing is that she is a mother of 5 who lives on a farm in Wisconsin. And so she actually found herself very burnt out because she was showing up as somebody who she was not, because she thought she had to play this specific part to be successful. And really, what I feel like happened in the process with her, I actually went to her farm and did an intensive with her, and this deep dive, and this beautiful vision came out where she wanted to do so much more than Beachbody. She wanted to create a leadership company. So we rebranded her as Luminary Leadership Company so she could actually help all types of entrepreneurs. And I think it gave her permission to show up who she truly is. So if you saw the before and after, now she's really showing up in her core essence on the farm with her children. And she was beautiful either way, but she just wasn't showing up as her true self. And her main piece of her vision was she is obsessed with John Maxwell, always has been. And she said, someday, maybe in my 10, 15-year vision, I want to work with John. I don't know what that looks like. The crazy thing is that we rebranded about 2.5 to 3 years ago. She just signed a major partnership deal with John Maxwell. And I'm not joking. Like, we had that in the back of our heads when we were branding, like, what would call that in? Who would she need to be, and how would this need to be positioned? So I love that specific one because it completely shifted her identity, not to something that she needed to be, but to who she truly was. And she was good enough as she was, amazing enough to call in this beautiful business and these partnerships. So
Mm.
that's one example. I have so many more, but I don't know if you have more questions.
Yeah, no, I love that story, Tiffany. Oh my gosh. This is why I've dubbed you the Dream Weaver, because it's so much more
Love
than branding. It's a journey. And I love that you said permission. The first thing that came to my mind was permission to be authentically you.
that.
Because
Mhm.
once that door opens, then all the pieces start to fall into place. The vision, your identity, your communication. Because once you open that door, there that all the answers are in front of you. You've given yourself permission to be authentically yourself. That could take a while because of all of our past programming. We have to
Mhm.
reprogram ourselves a lot sometimes. Like you said, in both cases, they had one had an idea of what she should be. The other was because of what her family and her parents had told her about being quiet. So, and that's a should as well. But yes, absolutely. Just beautiful. Thank you. I love the stories. They paint pictures much better than words could ever do by themselves.
So true. So
So
true.
I love it. Yeah, it's true. We resonate with stories. So tell us, on your website you have a brand quiz and it's free. I love that. Just give our audience an idea of what they can go in there and test something, because that is fabulous.
Yeah, absolutely. So the brand quiz is really to help people get clear on where they're at in their brand right now. And what steps to take first, because building a brand ecosystem, building a legacy brand, like we talked about, it is fairly deep work and there are different various steps. And it can feel a little bit overwhelming of like, okay, where do I start? Where is my specific disconnect? So by taking the quiz, it will really show you that most likely you're one of these three core, and they're not archetypes, it's really types of brands. Where are you sitting at right now? And then I give you specific strategic steps to then start to shift towards a legacy brand.
Hmm. Wonderful. Well, everyone can access that. We'll have the information in our bio pages, but absolutely go and treat yourself to that quiz, because that's a great first step. And you have more than one program. Can you tell our audience how they can work with you, and just touch on a couple of the few programs that you have available?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So, my core program is called Legacy Brand Foundations. And so, that's what most people who come into my ecosystem start with, which is the really getting clarity on your messaging and doing a lot of that deep work that we've been talking about here today. And you really move through the process step by step with my guidance to really look at your vision, your values, your voice, your audience. And a lot of people will say, well, I've done that work before, but you haven't done it this way, right? I also do that same process one on one. So I've had people fly in to work with me in intensives or VIP days, or we can do it virtually in a longer program. Then I also teach people to create their signature talks from stage. So that's another core offering where we look at once you have the brand, you need to really position it and put it out into the world. And the best way I believe to do that, yes, you can, do social media and do podcasts and all of that stuff's amazing. But when you know how to have a signature talk and speak that out into the world, so that's kind of another next level. I also have a women's collective networking / mastermind group that has come out of all of the amazing women that go through my programs, and they who were asking, what's next? We want to stay in this container. So that's created. So there's a lot of different ways, but really the Legacy Brand Foundations is that first core step to step into your legacy brand.
Right, right. Thank you. And all of that information and links will be available on the Epic Vision Zone bio pages, so be sure to check them out. And if there were one message, Tiffany, that you would like to share with the world, what would that be?
Mm. I would say, kind of going back to my core piece of my brand, is it's not a logo, it's not a brand board, it's your legacy. And really just remembering that the investment in your brand will stand the test of time for your business. So, if you walk away with anything today, I really hope that you remember that, and also that you are worthy of your dreams, no matter how big they are. And if you believe it, you can achieve it. I know that's like a said thing, but I know you and I truly believe that, Jane, and I've seen it time and time again myself and with so many clients.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. That was beautiful. And because we're here on the Epic Vision Zone, I have one last question. If your life were an epic story, what would the title be?
Always love that. You know, I think there's so many ways I could answer that question. I was thinking about it. I think for me, it would really be, you know, something around leaving a legacy one brand at a time, because I do have a lot
Mm.
of personal things in my life that mean so much to me, but I know that's the way that I'm personally going to be able to make a small change in the world for the better.
Well, thank you for that, Tiffany. What came to my mind was live your legacy out loud. I was just like, poof. That was
Mm,
something that I,
I love
I,
that. I will
yeah.
adopt that as well.
Okay. No, I just because we're here and it's really just don't keep it a secret, live it out loud. It's like live your epic vision out loud, right? So thank you again, Tiffany, for joining us here today. And you can find again all of Tiffany's information and social media links on the Epic Vision Zone bio pages. And be sure to follow me on Instagram at Jane Applegath. And don't forget to reach out to me at janeapplegath.com, where you can access your free downloads, the keys to your dream success. Looking forward to connecting with you. This is the Epic Vision Zone, transforming your dreams into epic success.